the Palestinian president and Benjamin Netanyahu. They'll be at the White House with President Obama. Here to talk about it is David Gilbert, reporting live from the Middle East. Good morning, David. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jimmy. Good morning.
All right. We hear about this shooting that took place. That there were a handful of Israelis murdered yesterday, and it's bound to have some impact on the meeting between the president and the prime minister. Correct?
Well, look, Jimmy. It's not the first time that there has been a terrorist attack aimed at thwarting any sort of a move forward in the peace process.
Right.
I think, in some sense, when I've talked to average Israelis and Palestinians in the last several days to try to take the temperature to find out what they're thinking and whether they think it's going to be successful or not, expectations among these ordinary folks is generally pretty low. But I think amongst the terrorists, the expectations might be a little bit higher, and that could be why they murdered those 4 civilians last night. Whose crime was that they were, driving in their car near the Jewish holy city of Hebron. As you know, there's 4 Jewish holy cities in the world, and one of them is not Boca Raton, but one of them is Hebron, which is in what's become known as the West Bank, and the PLO doesn't want any Jews living in their future states. So whereas you have 1 million Arabs living inside the state of Israel and of course, millions of Jews living around the world in Fort Lauderdale and Miami Beach and Boca, the PLO wants their future state to be free of Jews. So with that as the background, I think you can see that these negotiations are going to be pretty tricky for Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah. Is there any, you normally go to these, they meet every couple of years, it seems, after the United States tries to cajole both sides into getting together. But it seems that this has a low probability of success, doesn't it? More so than previous attempts.
Well, look, if you talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu or you talk to some of the folks in the PLO, there's a greater sense. I would say more on the Israeli side, there's a greater sense amongst Prime Minister Netanyahu, amongst Defense Minister Barak, who of course was the Prime Minister back in 2000 when he tried to make a deal with Yasser Arafat and President Clinton in Camp David. Mr. Barak very much thinks that it's possible within a year to sign some sort of a deal. The reality, of course, is, on the ground, this terrorist attack very much highlights the difficulty that if the PLO is going to be given a state, are they going to be able to control these folks who are perpetrating the terrorist attack? Now, Hamas, of course, claimed responsibility for this one, but in the past, the PLO itself has been involved in these terrorist attacks themselves. So it's difficult to imagine, what's going to be the day after there's a state, if there is going to be a state. Is Mahmoud Abbas going to be powerful enough, and is he going to be willing to put an end to terrorism against Israelis, Jimmy?
Yeah, and that's really the question, isn't it? Does Abbas really have the ability or the power, the political, capital to be able to pull off a deal anyway?
I think the short answer is no, but I think that question has been debated back and forth for a number of years now since Mr. Abbas took over for Mr. Arafat. Arafat, of course, passed away in 2004, and Abbas has been around since then. Abbas, of course, was by Mr. Arafat's side for 40 years, and I think it's clear that he is not Yasser Arafat. He doesn't have the same sort of widespread support that Mr. Arafat had. Love him or hate him, Yasser Arafat was the leader of the PLO, and everyone and their brother inside the PLO respected him and really kowtowed to his wishes. That same sort of persona doesn't exist with Mr. Abbas. So the debate continues in terms of whether Mr. Abbas really wants peace or whether he's capable of making peace. But ultimately, the only real question is whether he's capable. And, of course, this terrorist attack where 4 civilians were killed, being shot up on the roads, calls into question his ability to control the folks that want to thwart any sort of a peace.
Right. We're talking to 610 WIOD Middle East correspondent David Gilbert. David, final question for you. Mr. Netanyahu will also meet with the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak and Jordan's King Abdullah tomorrow. Is there the sense that those meetings are being held to apply pressure?
Look, if I was Prime Minister Netanyahu, I would be a little bit nervous about this whole festivity, as it were, because of course he's very much outnumbered. Mr. Netanyahu is a former commando; he's a macho kind of a guy.
Right.
But ultimately, most of the folks in that room are not exactly members of the Zionist Organization of America. I think, frankly, Mr. Netanyahu himself is concerned about which side the White House is going to be on. Typically the White House has backed the Israelis ever since the establishment of the State of Israel back in 1948.
Right.
But I think that's come into question in recent years, and I think Mr. Netanyahu goes into these meetings really not entirely sure as to how President Obama feels about this, how Secretary Clinton feels about this, and whose side they're really going to come down on when it comes to the difficult issues of dividing the land in terms of refugees, in terms of Jerusalem, in terms of settlements, and all these sticky issues that very quickly will become very, very difficult for the sides to figure out.
Yeah, it's going to be a very difficult couple of days in those conversations. David, thank you so much. You always shed a great light on situations in the Middle East. We appreciate your time.
Pleasure, Jim. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too. That's our 610 WIOD Middle East correspondent, David Gilbert, who, by the way, his family lives right here in South Florida. He does a great job for us when he's able to come on the program.